Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another installment of the Bald Chef of Bergamo. Today we're going to try something a little different, a little adventurous. We're going to try one of the best restaurants in the world, Massimo Bottura, his recipe for Bolognese. I'm going to do my own little version of it. He's a Michelin restaurant chef, obviously. I'm not that good, don't claim to be, but I'm going to do a little variation of it, show you that you can make a Bolognese high quality, high class, impress your friends. If you don't want to do my regular version, go with this one, kick it up a notch. Let's show you how you do it. So we're going to do this Bolognese with some short ribs, boneless short ribs. I took the bones off and threw them in the freezer. I'll use them for a beef stock later. And it's ossobuco, but it's actually just a beef shank, not a veal shank, just a beef shank and some oxtails. So I want to get some of the flavor from those oxtails and the wonderful tenderness from these shanks from the cow to go with the short ribs. Again, we're getting a lot of the flavor when you get meat from the bone, which is a little different than the last version where you're using the ground beef or whatnot. So I probably got about 3 pounds of beef here when I take all the bones out, and I'm going to throw a pound and a half of Italian sausage in later. So similar to what I've done with previous recipes, whether it's bracciola, or ossobuco. I'm going to lightly dust these with a little bit of flour and salt and pepper, and then I'm going to sear them in our pan, take them out, and then go with the next stage of the recipe. So let me start with the bones first, and then I'll move over to the short ribs. Okay, so I've got my big pot, put a little bit of olive oil in there, coming up the temperature. Let me get this just a little bit higher, and it'll start to sizzle. And I want to get a little scoring, a little searing effect on these. I'm not going to cook them all the way through because they're going to cook obviously in the Bolognese. Dust this one off a little bit. And as you can see in the background, I got some bread that I made just before lunch, half eaten unfortunately, but that'll go well with the Bolognese tonight. So a couple minutes on each side just to get a little brown charriness. Again, don't cook them all the way through. Take these out, and I'll do the same with the short ribs. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these out. I got some nice little crispiness there. Got these oxtails doing well. So I'm going to pull this out and then put in the short ribs. And I got a little bit of bits of brown chuck I'm going to throw in just because I got a little extra meat. Go big or go home, you know what I mean? So throw a little bit extra meat in there is fine. We'll just add additional proportions of the vegetables. So I got my meat done. Nice little brown on the short ribs, and took it out of the pot, and I got this nice little charred material. That's a lot of flavor there. So I'm gonna throw in start with the carrots for my Mirepoix, have them come up the temperature, and then I'll add, this is about a pound of carrots diced thin. I'll do the same with, I'll do a half a pound of white onion, and then a full pound of celery. And Massimo will say, let's use bone marrow instead of olive oil in your pot. It's hard to find bone marrow. Just go to the supermarket and find bone marrow. So that's why I'm using the flavor from the ossobuco, the beef shank, not the veal shank, the beef shank, and some of these oxtails. That'll help me get some of the flavor. Again, he would probably use cheek, tongue, beef tongue, cow tongue, which again is going to be very hard to find for the regular folks out there. So I'm trying to show you that you can get some great flavor with some good cuts of beef. Kind of kick up your recipes a little bit as opposed to using the ground beef recipe that I use. So this will start to cook, and I'll over time add the onions and the celery, and then in parallel I'll brown the sausage. So my Mirepoix is cooking down nice. So we'll put a little salt and pepper in there, just a bit, just to help sweat it out. And then over here I took a pound and a half, maybe a little more sausage, took it out of its casing, crumble it up, cook it, brown it. You only cook it all the way through because it's going to go into the sauce to try to get some of the fat out, and we'll drain this with a little towel before we add it into the Mirepoix with the rest of the beef as it comes. So the vegetables are done. Vegetables are done now. The sausage is essentially done. And I'm going to take about a cup of white wine and kind of deglaze my pot. Of course, a lot of that was done already with the sweating of the vegetables, but I want to get this fully deglazed, and then above all get some of that wine flavor for the braising. So that's just a white wine, Pinot Grigio. You can use whatever you like. You know, you don't want a Riesling or anything like that, but a Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay would be fine. Gavi di Gavi. Cosa? Cosa? Okay. Okay, in a minute, Mickey. Aspetta un attimo. Okay, I'm going to turn off this. Let this wine cook off, and I'm going to add the sausage. I'm going to drain a little bit, and I'm going to add the sausage to this and the rest of the meat and the tomatoes, and we'll go from there. Okay, so the sausage is in, and now I'm going to add about 30 ounces, 800 grams of tomato sauce. You can use a concentrate, just less volume. And I'm going to stir this in, and I'm going to add the meat back in, the rest of the meat, and then I'm going to top it off with some chicken broth before I add the spices. And let me get this mixed up and the meat added, and then we'll determine how much chicken broth to add, because we're going to add chicken broth depending on how much volume we need to cover. So I got all my meat in there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some chicken stock, because I want to make sure I cover it, and I probably need a little bit more. That was about 500 milliliters, 2 cups. I'm going to have to add just a little bit more. I want to make sure I got it covered. I put the bones, the oxtails, and the beef shank on the bottom. Dopo arriva fra un minuto, Mickey. Got to go turn the TV on to something else for the kids. Takes a while to cook this, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Trust me on that. So maybe another 100 milligrams, half a cup of chicken broth. I'll get that in a second. Top it off, and then I'll add the spices. Rosemary, fresh thyme, a couple bay leaves. Really, that's what you're looking for. And I'm going to bury that in there and cover this and let it simmer for a couple hours. So I've got 2 bay leaves, and I've got maybe 4 twigs of fresh rosemary and like a dozen of thyme, and fresh thyme. And I'm just going to dip it in here, and I'll push it below with, it's a little hot, burn my fingers. So I'm gonna push it below with my tongs. I guess they're right here. I can do that. Get it into the flavor, get it mixed in, and then have that covered. If you don't have fresh rosemary, fresh thyme, you know, maybe a tablespoon of each, maybe, I don't know, of dried. You know, it's all about a matter of taste and flavor. I find that thyme is very underutilized in kitchens nowadays, and it really provides a lot of great flavor and aroma to your dishes. So think about it. I got a bush out back, got a couple rosemary bushes as well. They go great in any climate. So you can see it starting to come up the temperature here. I'm going to kind of reduce the temperature just a bit. I'm going to cover this, and we got 2 hours of simmering. We'll check back then. Okay, so it's been 2 hours, maybe a little bit more than 2 hours. I'm gonna let this go another half hour. I've checked the meat, it's almost ready. I just had a lot of meat in there because I made a double batch here, but that's the type of bubbling simmering we want here. So I'm gonna go full 2.5 hours before I stop it, and then pull the meat out to cool off, and I'll show you what to do at that point. Okay, so I pulled the meat out. And as you can see, the beef shanks, the marrow is dropped out. It's in my Bolognese sauce. Pull it rolled out there. That's great. I'm gonna let this cool off. I took out the herbs. Let's cool off. I'm gonna chop up the meat nice and fine. I'm gonna peel away as much of the meat as possible from the oxtails, and I'll dice these up. And what you could do now, I got this a little too high here. Let me just pull this down. Is you can reduce the rest of your sauce if you want it thick or thin, depending on how you like it. And another option that is out there is to take a hand mixer, and you can puree the vegetables in here and a little bit of that sausage that's been cooking to kind of reduce, condense this. You got little kids like I do. Sometimes they don't like to eat their vegetables. They say it's got onions in it, it's got celery, I don't want it. So you can use a hand mixer and kind of zip, 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 thicken it up. So I'll probably do half and half. I'll do half of this and a puree it. The other half I'll leave as is so you can see both options. This is just about cool enough for me to start cutting it up. So I'll get to work on that. So what you got here is, I took a few ladle fuels. Actually, I did this 2 or 3 times. And then I just puree it. And, I could pour it back into here so you can get a little, you can get thicker if you want. Again, it's just to get the vegetables for the kids to eat. But I think I'm good with I did about 2 or 3 of those, maybe 3 cups, 4 cups of pureed the vegetables and sauce. And this will be nice and thick, but also have the consistency. I'll still have some carrots, onions, and then obviously I put the meat in there. So there will be some chunks here and there. All right, so I've got my sauce. It's condensed a bit, and I pureed a little bit, not a lot, as I mentioned. And then here's the meat that I diced up. So I'm looking for this type of size and consistency, kind of to match the cut of the carrots and celery, etc. So yeah, I mean, you could pull apart the spare ribs and make it shredded, but I like it in little bits and pieces like this because it'll be nice and chewy. So I'm going to add this back in, and then I'm going to put the water on. We're going to boil the pasta, cook the pasta, and then we'll be ready to serve. And look at this. Boy, I wish you could smell this because this is
delicioso.
Delicioso, fantastico, strepitoso. Okay. Okay, here's the finished article, the finished product. Now, we use penne pasta instead of tagliatelle, but that's what we had, and the kids like that as well. So you can see the chunks of this bolognese, the nice creaminess of that pureed. Oh, this is just going to be great. You see how the sauce is just captured inside of that pasta there? That's going to be great. Celeste, what do you think? Was it good?
Yeah. I think the pasta was good, the sauce was incredible, and the beef was awesome.
All right, thank you. So here you go. Michelin style bolognese with a little bit of Parmigiano Reggiano cheese.
Don't be intimidated by Michelin stars chefs. Get inspiration and make it your own.
And try this recipe at home all the time.
There you go. Bald Chef of Bergamo. Good eats.
Hot treats.